Okay, shall we get started? So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to join us today. My name is Yoriko Otomo. I'm Director of the Global Research Network, and it's been our pleasure to be working with Sabine at Global Animal Law in organizing this expert panel discussion on the UN Convention on Animal Health and Protection today. So with us, there is an incredible array of experts here to talk about the convention with us today, as well as a long list of eminent experts who are going to be joining us in the audience to give us their questions and comments. So you'll have an opportunity to join in shortly. There's also a live stream YouTube channel running this session. So if you're joining us there, welcome. And you can write in any questions that you have into the comments in the YouTube, and we can pose it to the speakers later on. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Sabine now.
Thank you, Yoriko, and welcome everyone from everywhere in the world. I am Sabine Brels from GAL, UNCAP head, and I had the chance to co-organize this major event with the GRN team who did an amazing work. I want to warmly thank the GAL president, Antoine Gertzell, the GRN director, Yoriko Otomo, and the dream team with Eva Bernet Kempers and Marine Lercier, to whom I now pass the word. Enjoy.
Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Yoriko. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Marine Lercier. I'm a PhD candidate in animal law at the Autonomous University of Barcelona and junior fellow of the Global Research Network's think tank on animals and biodiversity, which purpose is to connect people interested in animals and biodiversity and collaborate on a wide range of topics. It is a great honor to have the chance to moderate this discussion, gathering international animal law experts, which is of paramount importance for the global protection of animals. Today, all eyes are on the UNCAP, the United Nations Convention for Animal Health and Protection. We are holding this panel discussion in collaboration with the Global Animal Law GAL Association that drafted this convention, with whom it has been a pleasure to carry out this initiative. Today's objective is to unite around this crucial initiative for animal health and protection. Let's start 2021 with this hope to build a better future for human and non-human animals. We are sure that you panelists and you experts will be able to give us valuable keys to the success of this convention. We also have a thought for those who are following us live on YouTube now, and also thank those who will be watching it again. I now give the word to Eva.
Hello everyone, my name is Eva Bernet Kempers, and I will shortly take you through the program of today's event. So in the first part, we will have the immense honor of listening to the presentations of 6 internationally recognized experts who are doing exceptional work for animal protection. So each presentation will last a maximum of 10 minutes, during which the panelists will be seeking to highlight the need for a comprehensive approach to the issue from their regional perspective. After each presentation, we will select 2 questions that the other experts can address to the panelists in the conversation. So please write your questions directly in the public Zoom chat. So the second phase, once the presentations are over, it will be time to begin a discussion among GAL experts on the arguments in favor of the adoption of the UNCAP by the UN. Before we get to the heart of the matter, let us introduce to you the incredible people behind this ambitious project. Sabine Brels is the co-founder of the Global Animal Law GAL Association and head of the UNCAP project. Her work focuses on the best ways to get this global convention adopted at the UN, after having drafted the UNCAP with GAL founder and president Antoine Gertzell. Antoine is a world-famous Swiss lawyer and international law and ethics consultant, currently GAL president. He has been involved in providing better legal protection to humans, animals, and the environment for 30 years. So congratulations to both of you and to the entire GAL team, to whom we reiterate our gratitude for this partnership. So we will first have the honor to listen to a short video introduction by Antoine Gertzell. So let us greet Antoine, who is with us today, and listen together to this first video. I will share my screen with you so you can see it.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, sehr verehrte Damen und Herren, my name is Antoine Gertzell from GAL, and it's a marvelous honor and pleasure for the Global Animal Law GAL Association and for myself to open this panel discussion. The topic is the UN Convention on Animal Health and Protection, UNCAP, as drafted by the specialists of GAL for several years, and it has been published in a preliminary version midst 2018. It contains 16 articles on objective, principles, and very important, implementation. I'd like to start with a rather personal remark. During my recent fierce corona disease, I was astonished and concerned about the topics that were discussed publicly in extension. It was about masks, vaccination, skiing in Switzerland, and lockdowns. These were the topics in the focus, and almost no one spoke about the recent and future pandemics caused by zoonoses, that so by unhealthy and mistreated animals. The other big item of antibiotic resistance caused by over-treatment of farm animals was not even mentioned. Let's put the mask aside, although we from GAL with Naruto have a special nice one, and speak openly and friendly on the causes of zoonoses that mainly consist in low animal health and even lower animal protection standards worldwide. We also have to address the until now rather underestimated One Health and One Welfare concept that describes the interdependence of human health and well-being and animal welfare and protection on the other side. Therefore, the time is exactly right now for a global attempt to make animal protection, animal health, and One Health a global imperative at the United Nations. And from there, it supports animal protection and health as a global goal for all nations backwards. Although the animal welfare standards differ from country to country very much, as you can see on our Global Animal Law GAL database, every nation can and should improve its animal-related standards in legislation, enforcement, education, and prevention in their own frame. This progress is based on their various national backgrounds like cultural, social, economic, and religious dimensions. And this has been acknowledged in the first sentence of the preamble of UNCAP. UNCAP encompasses legal interests of all animals, globally, so the companion, farmed, lab, sports, and wild animals even. Therefore, the UNCAP content and campaigning can and should be supported by the whole animal protection and even animal rights movement. And it is holistic, including the health of animals and so of humans. We expect, therefore, the support also for this legally binding framework by veterinarian and other animal-related sectors as well. The UNCAP purpose is to protect animals, their welfare and health. The objectives described in UNCAP here on responsibility, care, and assistance in Article 1 based on animals' specific species, physiological and ethological needs. The guiding principles recall the scientifically recognized 5 freedoms of animals, and the 3 are for lab animals. The fundamental principles on animal sentience, precaution, intrinsic value, and even dignity of animals are already recognized by a large number of national legislations. They can rather easily be acknowledged by the legislators of less animal-friendly nations as well. We now invite you to point your ears, eyes, and hearts for all our impressively competent panelists from all over the world. Please thank them and the magnificent preparation team with Sabine Brels from GAL and author of the basic work on animals in global law, and Eva Bernet Kempers, Marine Lercier from Global Research Network, the Asmi Nardo Foundation, and the Usitavi Network to make this happen. Let us not only look forward to the speeches and discussions, but also to your urgently needed generous support of GAL and the UNCAP project. Animals concern us all. Their health and well-being can only be increased by us all together. UNCAP gives a common ground for that. Please support GAL and UNCAP. Thank you very much. And now it's open for the panelists and the discussions. Thank you very much for joining us.
So thank you very much, Antoine. Before opening the floor, actually, we will play Sabine's introduction now for you.
Dear global animal law experts and all participants, I'm so glad to be here with you today and begin this new year together. I hope you're in a good energy to make this major event a key step for advancing global animal protection. We're living a new era where individual animal protection is becoming a serious global concern. Animals need to be better protected. This is not just a wish. This is a clear necessity. Today, the GAL expert group is taking all its sense. We are all here together with a common objective: to make this world a better place for all the animals. When we co-founded GAL with Antoine Gertzell, who I really want to thank for his great introduction, I had a clear vision of gathering animal law experts to advance global projects for the animals at the highest level. Now we are here to discuss the idea of a Convention on Animal Health and Protection at the UN. This vision could become a reality also thanks to you. So I want to warmly thank you all for being part of this discussion and contribute to this positive shift worldwide. This time we're facing a global crisis. And do you know what the word crisis means in Chinese? Interestingly, it means both danger and opportunity. As Einstein said, in the midst of every crisis lies great opportunity. Today we have an unprecedented opportunity for change, changing everything which is unsustainable anymore, and even the deep roots of such a crisis, knowing zoonoses. Coming from where? From animal consumption. Because wildlife and farmed animals consumption can have severe impacts worldwide, as the current pandemic. That's why our way of treating animals urgently needs to evolve if we want our planet and all its inhabitants to live better in the future. Now it becomes obvious that animal health is not disconnected from human health, and that vital interlinkages exist in the web of life. Therefore, the One Health, One Welfare approach for humans, animals, and the planet is the new direction to take if we want to live in harmony and unity all together. As a solution, the UNCAP text, which can be found on uncap.org, promotes general principles of animal law, knowing non-cruelty and good treatment, in order to end avoidable cruelty towards animals and fully respect their sentience and dignity. It also aims to protect the fundamental interests or rights of animals, knowing their interest to live, to be free, to be well treated, and to be represented in courts. It also states the need to use and develop alternatives to animal products and exploitation. Finally, the last part gives clear guidelines for contracting parties to implement UNCAP provisions. As you can see, the UNCAP text is all-encompassing, able to reach a consensus between all animal protectors, whether conservationists, welfarists, or rightists. Therefore, I look forward to our further discussion and make a clear UNCAP statement to achieve our objective and make this world a better place for all animals. This event is an historical moment to make this change happen. It's up to us to do it now. I wish you a very fruitful conference with our brilliant panelists, and I want to thank the JRN team for their great work to make this event happen. I now declare this conference open. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabine, also. We will end the introduction with a short video to refresh our minds about what UNCAHP is all about.
Do you know that animals and humans' protection are strongly interconnected? Today, there is an urgent need to improve animal health and protection worldwide. Many countries have no law against cruelty to animals, or these laws are limited to few species and practices, often with low penalties and a lack of enforcement. The gap is that no global animal protection exists. The United Nations have addressed human and environmental protection, but animal welfare is still absent from the UN agenda. Now it's time for animals to be universally considered. To fill this gap, the solution is the UN Convention on Animal Health and Protection. Thanks to UNCAP, all animals will be protected in every country. This initiative results from key researches of international animal law experts. It is realistic and visionary enough to set up animal-friendly principles that should be present in every national legislation and constitution. Animals, humans, and the planet are not separated. The coronavirus and other zoonoses give us concrete examples. Now we know that mistreating and killing animals can have severe impact on human health. So if we want to better protect humans, we need to better protect animals. They cannot be left aside anymore. Global animal protection should become the new universal mission. You can support UNCAP now. Please help us to create a better world for all animals. Fill the gap with UNCAP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that you're all experts on the topic, it's time to give the floor to our 6 panelists.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Antoine. Our first panelist today will be Jessica Bridges. We are fortunate to have the Executive Director of World Animal Net as our keynote speaker to discuss how COVID-19 has shifted the global dialogue on animal welfare. Jessica is now working to help more animal protection organizations engage with the UN's Sustainable Development Agenda to ensure the interests of animals are considered. Her presentation will provide an overview of how various institutions have responded to the current crisis as it relates to animals. Jessica, it's an honor to listen to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Maureen. And thanks everyone for having me here today. Let me just share my screen and, whoops, let's see here. Okay, so I'm very glad to be able to discuss with the experts today and be on this panel, and it's really an honor. So thanks, Sabine, for inviting me. So my goal for today is to provide a background on animal welfare and international policy prior to COVID-19 and explore how this has shifted after the emergence of the pandemic, and then examine possible gaps that have hindered our movement's response and how we can overcome these going forward. Where we would like to be, of course, is in a world where there is a global convention protecting animal welfare, such as the UNCAHP. In my opinion, this is going to need incremental steps. So mainstreaming animal welfare is an issue that global institutions find relevant to the issues that they're working on. So in the Sustainable Development Agenda, making sure that animal welfare is included in various institutional reports that are coming out all the time on different issues. Recognition of World Animal Day could be another stepping stone that provides us an annual opportunity to raise the issue with policymakers. And the Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare could be another stepping stone along the way to a convention. So pre-COVID, with a few exceptions, animals and their welfare really are not addressed at the international policy level. So the World Organization for Animal Health has developed animal welfare standards that 182 countries have agreed to implement, but these are not enforceable. They're at a lower level than we would really like to see as animal protection organizations, and they only cover a few issues. So primarily farm animals, but not all farm animals yet, and stray animals, and to some degree animals in research. The Food and Agriculture Organization deals with animal welfare in a small amount, but I would say that it's kind of, there's not a lot of capacity for them to deal with it, and it's also fairly siloed as far as I can tell within the organization. So not all the departments are really on board with the concept of animal welfare. And then the International Finance Corporation has published a good practice note on animal welfare, which is meant to guide finance in livestock projects. And yeah, so the Sustainable Development Goals obviously cover a lot of issues related to animals. So food security, health, climate change, protection of aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems. But animals, aside from a very small mention of the wildlife trade in SDG 15, are really not included at all. And to date at UN Environment, there are, every 2 years, the UN Environment Assembly passes resolutions on issues related to the environment, but animal welfare hasn't been addressed by these so far. So COVID-19 is really an example of punctuated equilibrium, where we have a long period of policy stasis on animal welfare. And this crisis has really kind of reshifted the conversation and gives us potentially the opportunity to actually move the issue forward at the global level. So policymakers are now very focused on policies that could build back better or build forward, contribute to recovery and the prevention of future pandemics, and the linkages between human and animal health are coming up more than I've ever seen before. Despite this, there hasn't been a whole lot of change, and there's been no concrete actions taken on animal welfare at the global level. So the UN Environment Program, just I'll give an overview of how a couple institutions have dealt with the pandemic. So in July, UNEP and the International Livestock Research Institute published a report called Preventing the Next Pandemic. And this report identified 7 key drivers of pandemics and included increasing consumption of animal products, intensive agricultural production, and the exploitation of wildlife as 3 of the main drivers. So it really coherently identified the problems that we're facing, but the policy recommendations that related to these were fairly weak. There was also a recommendation published by the Collaborative Partnership on Sustainable Wildlife Management, which is a collaboration between a number of global institutions, so UN Environment Program and FAO, CITES, the Convention on Biological Diversity, and others. It had 4 main recommendations, one of which was to regulate, manage, and monitor the harvesting, trade, and use of wildlife to ensure it is safe, sustainable, and legal, which is not really the language that we would like to see being used and the approach being taken. With the Convention on Biological Diversity, there's a body called IPBES, which provides science-based policy recommendations, primarily to CBD, but also to the international policy, I guess, constellation. And so they published a report, I believe it came out in November, so after the UNEP report on biodiversity and pandemics. And I would say that this report was a bit stronger in its recommendations than the UNEP report was, but it remains to be seen whether or not institutions will actually take action on any of the points recommended. The CBD also hosted a recent webinar for member states and stakeholders to exchange views on One Health. So that was a really positive step forward. But when you actually listen to what member states were saying, it was quite shocking to hear how rarely animals in their own right would be mentioned by member states, and especially not their animal welfare. There was only one member state, which was Australia, that did actually mention animal welfare in their statement. And then the convention is also developing the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the framework that will guide its basically wildlife policy for the next 10 years at the international level. And at the moment, the most recent draft really reads as if there's not a pandemic going on at all. It might, of course, change between now and the time that it's actually adopted. And I think there's a chance it might. The webinar I mentioned seemed to be primarily meant to kind of push the co-chairs of this process to include One Health into the framework, which would be really positive. But at the moment, for example, the target 4 reflects the same language that CPW, the body I was mentioning in the previous slide, has used. In terms of development banks, there was a small group of animal protection organizations that wrote letters to many of these in the summer asking for divestment from intensive animal agriculture and from activities promoting the wildlife trade. But the responses that we received really just defended the existing practices as being sustainable. And for example, the IFC, as part of its recovery spending, has actually funneled over $300 million into intensive pig farms in China. And I think there was an additional 20 million for pig farms in the Ukraine. And that was part of the recovery spending in response to the pandemic. And that the UN General Assembly in December, there was a special session on COVID-19 with the panel on resilience and recovering from COVID. But there was really no strong mention of animal welfare or One Health. There was a very brief mention by the EU at the very end of the session. So that was a bit disappointing as well. So why has there been a lack of policy change? Obviously, it's been a tragic and devastating year for people around the world. So I don't want to say that it's an opportunity, but I mean, the conversation has shifted so much, and there would have been, you would think, more change on the issue of animals and how we relate to and use and abuse animals. So from my perspective, I think our movement was perhaps not adequately prepared to respond to the pandemic because of a few internal and external factors. So I think in terms of external gaps, in general, we really haven't embedded ourselves in the policy space internationally. So we haven't spent the years building the recognition, the trust and credibility, and the ability to communicate with decision makers effectively at the right time. And then internally, I think we have gaps in our horizontal and vertical communication across the movement. So by that, I mean, horizontally, we have a number of animal protection organizations working at the international level to lobby and advocate for change, but they're not always working in cooperation with each other. So they're not always sharing information and might not know what the other one is doing. So it reduces effectiveness to some degree. And then with vertical communication, for a lot of processes at the UN, there tend to be regional consultations. And while we might make sure that there are animal protection organizations at the European consultations or maybe the North American consultations, we're not making sure that the voices from the global south, so in Latin America, Africa, and Asia, are also being heard. So we need to work on building our movement so that it's more regionally diverse and the right messengers are reaching the right policymakers at the right time. So we just don't have an existing infrastructure that allows for rapid and coordinated responses to issues like COVID-19. So to move forward and build a global convention for animals, what I think we need to be working on as a movement is to facilitate better communication and coordinated advocacy across the movement, and then channel this into building the recognition and the communication that we need between the animal protection movement and global institutions, and as well as other social movements, because it's really critical that we have broad support. So what we need to do now is, I think we must begin the process of preparing for the upcoming Keystone events that will be happening later this year and into next year. in a coordinated and effective manner. We have the Animals Manifesto, which is a jointly drafted document that provides support, broadly supported policy asks. There's over 170 organizations supporting it, and as well as Dr. Jane Goodall. So I think this is a starting place for our messaging, our joint messaging, and we can, we worked with Global Animal Law to ensure that for the UN General Assembly, one of the key asks is for a convention on animals. So it's really time for us to join our forces and build momentum to get to the point where we can have a convention on animals at the UN level. So these are just a couple of the major roadmaps, major events for the coming year. So there's big events on biodiversity, food systems, climate change, and the environment. So these are all places where we can work to raise these issues together. So in conclusion, COVID-19 has really provided a turning point in the policy discussions at the international level. We might not have been totally prepared at the beginning, but I think it's not too late to begin building the infrastructure that we need to achieve our common goals of a convention for animals at the international level. So I'll leave it there, and thanks everyone. I'm happy to have questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for your brilliant presentation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to write it in the public chat, and we will ask Jessica to answer us. Well, you will still have the opportunity to come back to addressing some of the points that were raised by Jessica during our experts discussion. I see that we have a comment now, so I'm going to read the questions. So Mrs. Bridges, on November 11th, 2020, the European Union has adopted one communication, building a European health union, reinforcing the EU's resilience for cross-border health threats. Among others, the communication acknowledges the link between antimicrobial resistance and pressures on biodiversity. The question is, do you think that such a statement proves that the EU has understood the need to include animal welfare as one of the capital pillars to achieve their goals and fight against pandemics? I hope the question was clear enough as I was reading out loud.
Thanks, Maureen, and thanks, Jose. So I am not an expert on European policy. That is something I can say very certainly. So it does sound like a positive development. I think antimicrobial resistance is an important issue that needs to be addressed. Using a one health and one welfare approach, I mean, it's an obvious thing that has to be addressed. So it sounds like it's a step in the right direction, but I have to admit, I'm not familiar enough with it to say decisively if it was what we would like to see happen. Maybe there are others in today's call that would be able to answer that question better.
Thank you. We have another question, and it might be the last one before our next panelist. A question from Elizabeth Montero. How can we help or support in order to make all the animal organizations really work together?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So with World Animal Net, what we've tried to do is build a platform where animal protection organizations can communicate with each other a bit better. And so I think that collaboration led to the Animals Manifesto. So yeah, so we have a number of resources that we've developed to accompany the manifesto and help animal protection organizations distribute it to policymakers. So yeah, I'm happy to be in touch about that. And I think there's some potential developments in the course of the year that will make it easier for animal protection organizations to work together. But yeah, that'll be in the future. Yeah.
Well, we had quite similar questions from YouTube asking if there is such an effort to include the animal protection groups into a coalition, and if there are local mastermind groups for each global area for horizontal communication.
Yeah, so I would say that there is some more robust structures that are in the works. And so to, keep an eye out for something along those lines later this year.
Yeah, hopefully. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for your questions. And we look forward to coming back to it in the experts discussion. I now give the floor to Eva to introduce our next panelist, who is Jacob Zinstag.
Yes, thank you, Jessica. As our second speaker, we are very happy to welcome Jacob Zinstag, who is the Deputy Head at the Human and Animal Health Unit, Department of Epidemiology and Public Health of the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute. Today, he will tell us something about the One Health vision and its consequences for animal protection and welfare, enlighten us how the UNCAP contributes to prevent new pandemics. At the moment, he's, however, located in Ethiopia, and we are not sure whether he can connect, but let's see if he's among the participants. Jacob, are you there? Can anyone check whether he is in the waiting room? Because I saw him not long ago.
Yes, Jacob was just with us a few minutes ago. Maybe we are going to present our next panelist and come back to Jacob if he's with us in 15, 20 minutes. Okay?
Yes, good idea.
So our next panelist is Lorena Vilicic, President and founder of Animal Use Argentina, Director of the Animal Rights Observatory, talented and formidable lawyer and professor at the University of Buenos Aires, and international consultant in animal law. She was the organizer of the first International Virtual Congress of Animal Law in 2020 and co-authored the book Legal Protection of Non-Human Animals. She is also an independent expert at the UN Harmony with Nature program. Her presentation will explore the non-human person new paradigm to provide a South American perspective for a global approach. Unfortunately, Lorena is not able to be with us live today. However, she kindly offered to be with us thanks to this video that we are now going to watch, and she apologizes to you all for not being with us, but she's following us.
Hola a todos y todas, continuando con este panel de discusión, paso a presentarme. Soy la doctora Lorena Vilicic, argentina, abogada, docente investigadora, abocada al derecho animal y miembro del grupo de expertos de Global Animal Law. Dado que se han inscrito a este evento un número de personas de habla hispana, daré esta breve presentación en español con subtítulos en inglés. Para comenzar, compartiremos entonces unas diapositivas. Bien. Abordaremos brevemente la cuestión de los animales no humanos y sus derechos fundamentales. Todo esto en aplicación de esta convención, la cual nos ha convocado hoy para su tratamiento. Y para esto, considero de suma importancia fijar postura en cuanto a algunas de las cuestiones que creo forman parte de la problemática actual, y su tratamiento sería fundamental para establecer un marco de avance básico hacia el reconocimiento de estos derechos. En tal sentido, que existe urgencia de reconocer derechos fundamentales a los demás animales como sujetos en todo el mundo, sin distinción de especie, entre ellos principalmente los derechos a la vida, a la integridad psicofísica, a la libertad, de promover el abandono de la autojustificación de la violencia contra los animales no humanos, basada en las costumbres, rechazar su institucionalización, que es totalmente contraria al reconocimiento de sus derechos, de rechazar de igual modo el especismo, siendo este una forma de discriminación que perpetúa la violencia, el maltrato y la crueldad contra los demás animales, de establecer obligaciones por parte de la sociedad y el Estado de respetar y garantizar sus derechos por ser seres sintientes sujetos de una vida, Debemos apuntar a la justicia, a la educación, a la prevención, a la elaboración de leyes, políticas públicas y una política criminal adecuada, todo esto con una perspectiva antiespecista, a una representación legal amplia, que junto con el acceso a la justicia permita su actuación directa en los casos donde se vulneren sus derechos, a la adopción de instrumentos de carácter nacional e internacional que permitan su protección y defensa, y que de ningún modo regulen el maltrato, sino que con un norte abolicionista establezcan un real cambio en su protección. También, y por último, a la creación de organismos nacionales e internacionales abocados a su protección y defensa, cuyos objetivos sean la real tutela efectiva de sus derechos fundamentales. Continuando. Si bien no abordaremos cuestiones específicas en relación a la filosofía del derecho y la ética práctica, creo que es oportuno mencionar algunos de los pensadores que se han pronunciado de distinto modo, tanto a favor o en contra, con diferentes enfoques en relación al derecho de los demás animales, hasta llegar hoy a las posturas éticas en las cuales nos apoyamos tanto para su consideración moral como legal. Aprovechando la ocasión, quiero destacar en Argentina el trabajo de la doctora Silvina Peseta, docente universitaria e investigadora en el campo de la ética animal, también del fallecido jurista argentino, el doctor Carlos Nino, que considero que indirectamente nos ha aportado muchísimas herramientas desde la teoría del derecho para plantear la cuestión de estos derechos fundamentales. En relación a la ciencia, destacar obviamente la Declaración de la Conciencia de Cambridge, y también el trabajo realizado por los doctores Cédric Riot, Caroline Regat y Louis Balmont, con sus aportes al reconocimiento de la personalidad jurídica de los animales no humanos por medio de la Declaración de Toulon, en Francia, que considero que es sumamente importante. Siguiendo con esta exposición, partiremos de la base fundamental, que es la sintiencia, como la capacidad de tener una experiencia subjetiva y de dolor y placer. Es el prerequisito cuando hablamos de intereses, tomando estos intereses fundamentales como para ser considerados moralmente, en este sentido los animales no humanos y también los animales humanos, ¿no? Hablamos de este interés de la mano de la sintiencia, que los hará acreedores del principio de igualdad de consideración de intereses, determinando que no son nuestras cualidades o habilidades personales las que determinan si somos o no merecedores de la titularidad de un derecho, sino que lo son nuestros intereses. Todo esto como base fundamental para la igualdad y como punto de partida de rechazo al especismo. Para realmente tener un avance en cuanto al reconocimiento de los derechos de los animales no humanos, resulta indispensable abandonar la visión antropocéntrica en todos sus aspectos y entender realmente cuál es el bien jurídico protegido del derecho animal, que no serán otros que sus derechos fundamentales, que van, por supuesto, más allá de la especie. En lo que respecta a la consideración jurídica de los animales no humanos en América Latina, vemos cambios que se han ido reflejados en los ordenamientos de distintos países y de manera diversa. En muy poco se ha logrado un cambio constitucional incorporando al animal no humano como ser sintiente. Sí, progresivamente se ha ido avanzando en cierta protección, pero no de manera determinante en cuanto al reconocimiento de su calidad de sujeto de derechos en los distintos plexos normativos, ¿no? Si bien estos cambios, como dije, han sido progresivos y valiosos, aún no vislumbramos una real modificación en cuanto a la consideración jurídica con respecto a sus derechos fundamentales que se vean reflejados congruentemente en sus distintos plexos legales. Acá tenemos algunos ejemplos de algunos países, como Argentina, Bolivia, Brasil, Chile, que está intentando en este momento que se incorpore en la Constitución a los animales no humanos. Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, México, que ha tenido un cambio constitucional en su Carta Magna del Estado de México. Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, Panamá, Paraguay, Perú, República Dominicana, El Salvador, Uruguay, Venezuela. Son algunos de los países a los que hago referencia. Tomando el ejemplo de Argentina como uno de los países latinoamericanos que ha tenido un gran avance en relación a la protección de los demás animales. Tenemos la primera ley de protección animal, la ley 2786 del año 1891, llamada Ley Sarmiento, y la actual ley 14346, que data del año 54, contra actos de malos tratos y crueldad contra los animales, una ley complementaria al Código Penal y obligatoria en todo el territorio nacional. Lo novedoso de esta ley la encontramos en su artículo primero, que expresa: será reprimido con prisión de 15 días a 1 año el que infligiere malos tratos o hiciere víctima de actos de crueldad a los animales, es decir, asigna con la palabra víctima su calidad de sujeto de derecho. No obstante a esto, en el Código Civil y Comercial de la Nación, se ubican a los animales no humanos dentro de este código, en el régimen de propiedad, como si fueran cosas, un absurdo. En lo que respecta a la protección constitucional, existe por medio del artículo 41, protegiendo la biodiversidad y con herramientas como el habeas corpus y el amparo, del artículo 43. En el Código Penal también los ubica dentro de los delitos contra la propiedad, con excepción, como hemos visto, de la mencionada ley, que le asigna calidad de víctima, es decir, de sujetos de derecho. Y también hay numerosas leyes de distinta jerarquía normativa que ha tenido avances en cuanto a la protección de los derechos de los demás animales, como por ejemplo la Ley de Conservación de Faunas, de Carreras de Perros y otras. Lo más importante, creo que uno de los mayores logros en este país, es la consideración jurídica lograda por el gran avance jurisprudencial, que se ha logrado utilizando como herramienta la Ley 14346 a través de distintos fallos que se han pronunciado, que la justicia se ha pronunciado a favor de los animales no humanos, literalmente como personas no humanas, reconociendo su calidad no solo de seres sintientes, sino también de sujetos de derechos. Entre algunos de estos fallos encontramos el caso de la orangutana Sandra, de la chimpancé Cecilia, el caso del chocolate, etc. Bien, entonces para un real reconocimiento de derechos necesitamos que mínimamente se parta de los derechos fundamentales de este reconocimiento, los derechos a la vida, a la integridad psicofísica, a la libertad, entre tantos otros, que son derechos básicos que mínimamente cualquier ser sintiente, humano o no humano, debe tener y deben ser reconocidos, tiene y deben ser reconocidos. Este reconocimiento se debe plasmar en una realidad reflejada en cada individuo, en la sociedad toda en cuanto a su consideración moral, y en los estados a través de la protección jurídica que represente un cambio significativo. Ahora bien, y entrando en la convención en particular, elaborada por Gall en este primer borrador, se divide en estas secciones: un preámbulo, objetivos, principios, implementación. Tengo que aclarar que esta no es una traducción oficial. Voy a enumerar solamente algunos puntos del preámbulo y de ciertos artículos, pero pueden descargar el documento oficial en el sitio web de Global Animal Law. Algunos de los lineamientos del preámbulo, son algunos, no están todos, los leeré brevemente. Establece que las partes contratantes reconocen que la protección animal es un tema complejo, multifacético, que involucra dimensiones éticas, culturales, sociales, religiosas, políticas, económicas y científicas, que los intereses y las necesidades de los animales no humanos deben ser plenamente considerados en todos los campos de la actividad humana, que la necesidad de proteger a las especies de animales silvestres de amenaza de extinción ya está siendo reconocida en algunos instrumentos internacionales. Se considera también la necesidad de proteger mejor a todos los animales, a todos, sin distinción de especies. Recordemos que acá los animales no son de ni para, ¿no? Pero acá se habla de manera enunciativa para que se pueda identificar a aquellos animales compañeros, a los que están en las granjas, lamentablemente en los laboratorios, a los salvajes y a otros que son sometidos a actividades como el deporte, el entretenimiento y otras. También se considera la necesidad de cooperación y compromiso entre todos los estados, miembros de la ONU, en implementar medidas eficientes. Recomendar la creación de una institución de Naciones Unidas sobre salud, bienestar y protección animal. Recordar el mandato de la ONU para un mundo pacífico que no se limita a los seres humanos y debe extenderse a todos los animales individuales no humanos. Mencionar la Carta Mundial de la Naturaleza de las Naciones Unidas, que establece que cada forma de vida es única, garantizando el respeto independientemente de su valor para el hombre. y para otorgar a otros organismos tales reconocimientos, el hombre debe guiarse por un código moral. En lo que respecta al contenido de esta convención, es amplio y abarca, entre otras cuestiones, los animales como seres sintientes, su valor intrínseco, la dignidad animal, la necesidad de cooperación entre estados, medidas de protección en general, educación pública, concientización, etcétera, en los cuales realmente no me voy a detener en esta ocasión por motivos de tiempo. Sí lo haré con el artículo 5 de este primer borrador, que trata sobre los derechos fundamentales establecidos por esta convención. El derecho a vivir, a ser libres, a ser bien tratados y no sufrir en ningún caso daño, y a la representación. A vivir, no ser asesinados innecesariamente, a ser libres, a no ser confinados, ¿no? Permitiendo que los animales sean libres en un ambiente que satisfaga sus necesidades y preferencias, a ser bien tratados, y en cualquier caso debe evitarse todo daño a la vida, a la libertad y la integridad de cualquier animal individual en la mayor medida posible. Yo creo que siempre se debe evitar. Al interés de estar representados, dada la incapacidad de defenderse, los animales no humanos tienen interés de ser representados. Cuando seres humanos o corporaciones estén transgrediendo los intereses fundamentales de los animales descritos en esta convención, este interés de representación en procedimientos penales, administrativos, civiles, debe estar claramente establecido a nivel nacional, dando derecho a las autoridades estatales y a los elementos de la sociedad civil descritos con precisión a defender los intereses fundamentales de los animales. Fíjense que en este artículo 5 reconocemos el derecho a la vida, se reconoce el derecho a la vida, a ser libre, a la integridad psicofísica y a la representación legal. Creo que hay un largo camino por delante para trabajar, que siempre se puede mejorar, pero que es un enorme comienzo poder abordar estos derechos fundamentales a los que hemos hecho referencia. Casi finalizando, y como dato relevante, hay cuestiones que me parece que debemos atender siempre, que estos avances que se realicen siempre representen una evolución y nunca una evolución en el reconocimiento de derechos. Es decir, en este caso, tengo la plena convicción que en ningún aspecto se debe regular la violencia, el maltrato y la crueldad, sino que debe prohibirse siempre. Y que estos avances que hemos nombrado se deben plasmar no solamente a nivel legislativo, como hemos visto, sino de manera integral en la educación, la concientización, como también en las políticas públicas, como referí anteriormente, en una política criminal adecuada, y también, obviamente, en el compromiso en cuanto a este reconocimiento de derechos de los animales no humanos a nivel individual, social, estatal y, por supuesto, en la justicia. Para finalizar, quiero dejar esta frase, que todos seguramente conocemos: la grandeza de una nación y su progreso moral pueden ser medidos por la manera en la que son tratados sus animales. Esta frase de Gandhi, que siempre creo que utilizamos mucho con respecto a la causa animal. Y agradecerles a todos por su atención. Dejo acá los datos de contacto, los míos y obviamente los de Global Animal Law, para que puedan descargar la convención y acceder a una gran cantidad de información y herramientas, en cuanto a la protección animal que están disponibles a través del sitio web. Muchas gracias a todos y todas. Nos vemos en la próxima ocasión.
So, thank you very much, Lorena. Unfortunately, she's not here with us now, so we won't have any questions directed at her. Instead, we will go on with the next presentation, which will be by Dirk-Jan Verdonk. And Dirk-Jan Verdonk is the director of the Dutch Office of World Animal Protection and chair of the Dutch Animal Coalition. Furthermore, he's the author of several books regarding the human-animal relation and vegetarianism. The latest one, Dierloos, came out last year. Today he will tell us about the efforts relating to the Universal Declaration of Animal Welfare and highlight the lessons that we can learn from this first effort for an international instrument for animal protection. Thanks to Dirk-Jan for his presence today and his great work for animals. We are all listening.
Thanks, Eva, and thanks for inviting me. Can you hear me all right? And you can see my screen. Fantastic. Then we're all set to start. Indeed, so I work for World Animal Protection, which is a global animal welfare organization with offices around the globe. And I'm director of the Dutch office and also chair of the Animal Coalition in the Netherlands. I'd like to address today our efforts to achieve a universal declaration on animal welfare. Starting with some historical context and also about the United Nations, the sort of origins of the idea of a universal declaration, the support and our efforts, and our difficult journey to get there, and end with some lessons from our journey for the journey to reach an uncap. So to start with historical context, which I like because I'm a historian by training. The whole idea of international justice and international collaboration is a very old one that only started to get traction around the turn of the 19th to 20th century when a peace conference was held and the idea of an international court for justice was proposed. But it needed a world war to achieve a League of Nations, which then was a failure, and a second world war to create the United Nations and to achieve a universal declaration on human rights. So it took decades and 2 world wars to achieve that kind of international dream, realizing the international dream of a body that really represents all the countries on this globe in an effort to achieve peace and human rights and acknowledging the dignity of humans. And I think that's a good reminder for ourselves. Then if you turn to the United Nations, I don't go through all this, but it started with the General Assembly, Security Council, the International Court for Justice, Economic and Social Council, and then throughout the years, it proliferated in tens of agencies and programs and committees, and so it's a wide organization with addressing all kinds of issues. I listed some that are of special interest for us: the Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO, the Environmental Program, founded in the early 70s, the Committee on World Food Security, which I will talk about a little bit later on as well. Then in the 80s, the Commission on Environment and Development, resulting in an important Sustainable Development Summit in 1992, which kickstarted the UN Climate Convention and the Biodiversity Convention. But it's very good, I think, to realize for us that the United Nations was created for peace between nations and for human rights. So it's a very much a anthropocentric organization. It is human-centered, and that pervades everything. Still, you can see throughout the years that there is a shift to broaden stakeholder engagement. So not just sort of gatherings between nation states, but they include other stakeholder groups as well. And there is a clear shift in the understanding of human rights, which has been broadened. And there is, in the literature, there's sort of 3 generations of human rights: the sort of old political and civic rights, the so-called blue rights, then the economic and social and cultural rights that came to the scene after the Second World War, and that sometimes are labeled the red rights, and then broader community intergenerational sustainability rights, the green rights that slowly emerged in the 70s and 80s and since then. And that is reflected in what the UN is all about. I mentioned the 1992 Earth Summit in Rio. That was important to really redirect attention of the United Nations to sustainability and environmental issues. 10 years later, the World Sustainable Development Summit in Johannesburg, the introduction of Earth Day and the Harmony of Nature resolution, the 2012 Rio +20 conference, and now the Sustainable Development Goals that Jessica has mentioned as well. So this is the context that we are pursuing our goal for animal protection. And again, I'd like to stress that that's quite a challenge because this is such an anthropocentric endeavor, the whole UN, and we are trying to broaden it up and to include other animals as well. Now that idea to also have a universal declaration on animals is again an old idea. It already originated in the 1950s with the idea for a charter of rights for animals pursued by the World Federation for the Protection of Animals, which is a forerunner of my organization. There was an initiative in the 1970s where at the office of UNESCO in Paris, a declaration was presented, but it really started in the year 2000 during a conference in which our organization, together with others, launched a sort of initiative to really work on a universal declaration on animal welfare, which would be a non-binding declaration, but to set principles that would give the recognition that animals are sentient beings and that they deserve protection by the international community. And by doing so, it would raise the profile of animal welfare. It would give a firm footing to engage with governments to establish animal welfare laws where they don't exist, or strengthen those where they do already exist. The recognition that animals are connected with humans and to the environment, so that there is a joint stake here, and so that was the idea. It was recognized already at the time that it would be a first step, but an important step for all kinds of reasons. But also a springboard to future work at national level, but also at international level. And when I prepared this presentation, I came across a quote from 2007. Who knows, in the future, this could become a convention or a treaty. So I thought that resonated very well with the whole idea of UNCAP. And indeed, a declaration could be such a stepping stone. Now, in the beginnings of this initiative, again, they started in 2000 with the idea. World Society for Protection of Animals, which is now World Animal Protection, was tasked to champion the initiative. We had a core NGO group with some other international animal protection organizations, and it was really kicked off in 2003 in the Philippines on a conference at which a draft intergovernmental text for universal declaration was first drafted, and then 2 years later a little governmental steering group committee meeting was held in Costa Rica. You see here the picture in which representatives of 5 countries across the globe agreed that they would champion that initiative. And my organization then launched a big effort to generate support for this idea. So we embarked upon a global campaign called Animals Matter, involving hundreds of animal welfare groups to collect signatures from all over the world, including from celebrities. You see Ricky Gervais underneath in the middle. And we collected in total, in the end, close to 3 million signatures globally. We also recruited organizational support, especially from veterinary organizations, including the World Veterinary Association, the World Animal Health Organization, all kinds of regional and national veterinary organizations, the International Federation for Organic Agricultural Movements, etc., etc. 100 plus, I think, organizations in total. And most importantly, we try to get support from countries, from governments. And we put in a big effort to generate that support, either from governmental level or from ministerial level. And throughout the years, we managed to get tens of countries behind the initiative. I listed a few, and on the picture you see the president of Costa Rica signing his support for a Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare. So far, so good. By the way, and the EU also endorsed the development of a Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare in 2009, when it adopted Council conclusions to that end. So far, so good. And then we thought, okay, now we are sort of ready to give the push in New York at UN level. And what better opportunity than the upcoming Rio+20 conference on sustainable development. Our idea was, okay, we need to get animal welfare in the final agreements on sustainable development, and then we have our springboard to a UN declaration. Also knowing that there was already talk about the development of sustainable development goals that would likely surface in the outcome document of the Rio+20 conference. So we put in a lot of efforts. Jessica talked about the regional consultations. We were at all the regional consultations. We were at all the intersessionals in New York leading up to the Rio+20 conference. But we hit a wall. We got back, animal welfare is not a UN concept. It's not agreed language. And diplomats were not willing to embark upon new concepts for this declaration. That was a very firm message that we got back again and again, and countries were not willing to really put out their heads and really champion this issue, given the full agenda with all kinds of other issues that they deemed more important at that moment. So that was a setback, and that was really a sort of impasse that we reached, and sadly that meant that animal welfare was missed basically as a concept also within the Sustainable Development Goals. So we needed to think about an alternative route to include animal welfare in the UN agreed language universe. And we found a door at the UN Committee on World Food Security in Rome, which is open to all UN members and which has a very progressive stakeholder participation mechanism, including for civil society. They were just starting with principles for responsible investments in agriculture and food systems. So animal welfare was a very sort of natural concept for them to include. And we managed to get it in, and so there was language, small language, but still the concept of animal welfare was part of a UN agreed policy tool now. And 2 years later, that's also sort of flowed into recommendations in terms of livestock production that the UN Committee on World Food Security adopted, and which we also were able to put animal welfare in. So from 2016 onwards, life seemed better again for a Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare. That means that we've been working hard in Africa, mostly in recent years, and we got support from the African Union, and at the moment we have support from explicit support from 67 countries globally. From Africa, a very strong voice now. There is research showing that animal welfare is indispensable to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Even the UN Secretary General last year publicly endorsed the need to acknowledge that animals are sentient, and that such a recognition must mean that animal welfare must be respected and reflected in law. So we are actually at the moment, I think, in a very good place to give a final push for this idea of a universal declaration. This year we will establish a champion group for the Universal Declaration. That group will sort of revisit the draft resolution, and then we will try to seek endorsement for a UN resolution this year at the UN General Assembly in October, November in New York. So fingers crossed, we will have a Universal Declaration on Animal Welfare adopted by the UN at the end of this year, which then indeed provides, I think, a very important milestone on the way to a binding agreement. Now, what kind of lessons can we draw upon our journey? I think, again, the long-term perspective is important. This is no small feat. This is the whole world embracing a certain project, which really takes time. So it's normal that this takes decades. I think it's important to connect animal welfare with other issues that governments care more about, including climate change, including public health, including economic development and biodiversity. I think perfect is the enemy of good. We will not have all that we would like to see. We need to find and cherish champions for such initiatives at governmental level. The journey is as important as the end, because there's great milestones along the way that are important in themselves. And finally, don't give up. If the road is blocked in front of you, find your way around it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dirk, for this great presentation. We've sent you some of the selected questions that we received, especially on YouTube, where there seems to be very active participation. Could you maybe read them and give us a few thoughts on it? Can you see them, or do you want me to?
Yes, I'm trying to go through them. There's a question from Leida, I think. Is there any research done on what the impact is on animal issues from the existing treaties programs of UN? I'm not aware of that, so that would be a great research program, Leida, and good to see you. You're here too. Jessica Milo, I would like to know what happened with DUBA. Remind me what that acronym means. Does anyone know? Declarate?
Is Jessica with us? I guess she's on YouTube. Well, I think we are, yeah, maybe Yoriko?
Yeah, sorry. I think that Jessica's on YouTube, so You may need
Yeah, she is.
Preeti to ask her. Yeah, thank you.
And then there's the question, how will this translate into ground action? And that is, I think, in all these endeavors, that is a critical question. And the answer is that's up to us to ensure that these international policy instruments and policy declarations and policy treaties, etc., are actually implemented and are followed up, and that is a lot of work, but that work also needs to be done at ground level, and these instruments then give you the tools to do so. So that would be my my short answer to that one. And there's two more messages. A question, let me see.
Yeah, we have a question from Antoine Gertzell. Could UDO be seen as a basis for a more concrete, binding, and broader animal health and One Health UNCAP?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think again, I mean, it's an evolution, and first states will be reluctant to commit to things that cause them trouble. Or that could harm vested interests, etc. So first, a non-binding step is presumably feasible, but then you need indeed to come up with the next step. And I really do think that UDO could prepare the path to UNCAP. But there's also another question above by Ian Offer. Interested to speak. Oh, that's a personal message, I think. I'd love to speak to you too, Ian. Please contact me.
Okay, thank you very much, Dirk.
Most welcome.
Our penultimate and prominent panelist will be Louise van der Merwe. Louise is doing a tremendous job of education, an essential pillar to bring about change in the treatment of animals. Indeed, Louise is a managing trustee of the Human Education Trust in South Africa and editor of the national magazine Animal Voice. Louise's work in humane education will be included in the forthcoming Humane Education Handbook, edited by the Oxford Centre for Animal Ethics. Louise will give us a meaningful presentation discussing with us why Nelson Mandela would have regarded the UNCAP as the greatest gift that can be given to children and even grown-ups, a more humane society. Louise, you have our full attention. We will be playing your video.
I look back on the 32 years I've dedicated to achieving better lives for animals through education. Heart and soul, I ask the United Nations to adopt UNCAP. In doing so, the UN will deliver to the world the political will to achieve what South Africa's iconic leader Nelson Mandela called the greatest gift. To quote him precisely, Mandela said, "In time we must bestow on South Africa the greatest gift, a more humane society." I would like to tell you about the recent huge success of our online humane education program in South Africa. Under the name Caring Classrooms and underpinned by the 5 Freedoms for Animals, as endorsed by the OIE, each lesson plan is curriculum aligned. We did not dream that in the space of 9 short months, educators across South Africa would sign up to download our lesson plans, and to date, it's up to almost 4,000 times. In fact, to say the least, we feel delightfully swamped. Based on estimates by these educators, close to 25,000 learners across South Africa have benefited so far, in less than a year. Wow. At last, it seems the world is ripe for a new education. If we are to change the world, if we are to offer our children, our grandchildren, hope for the future, if we are to heed the call of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that making peace with nature is the defining task of the 21st century, if we are honestly to claim our constitutional right to human dignity, then I believe we must urgently start to teach our children how to be proudly human. Not just humans out to exploit no matter the real cost, but humans who are custodians, dependable, strong, and courageous enough to do the right thing for the world. Courageous enough to do the right thing for the world and all that journey through it. How else will we still be around in generations to come? How else can our young ones trust the future? The old adage tells us to bend the tree while it is young. Aristotle told us that educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. Professor Simon Baron-Cohen at the Department of Psychology and Psychiatry at Cambridge University tells us that empathy, or rather lack of empathy, is at the root of evil. He says, and I quote, "Empathy is the most valuable resource in our world, and the most valuable social resource in our world." He says, "It is puzzling that in school or parenting curricula, empathy figures hardly at all. And in politics, business, the courts, or policing, it is rarely, if ever, on the agenda. The erosion of empathy is a critical global issue of our time," he says. And this is certainly something with which the world's non-human animal inhabitants would agree. How do we justify leaving their well-being, the well-being of the animals, out of our moral circle of care, compassion, respect, and justice? There can be no justification for that. And we leave them out at our cost. Phil Arco is a renowned expert on domestic violence and author of the long title I'm about to read, Child Abuse, Domestic Violence and Animal Abuse, Linking the Circles of Compassion for Prevention and Intervention. That's the title of his tome. In a country so ravaged as ours with domestic violence, we arranged for Phil Arco to conduct 2 lecture tours in South Africa. Arco says this, and I quote, "While being kind to animals is certainly a nice thing to do, is certainly the right thing to do, it is only when people in leadership positions recognize that animal abuse has adverse effects on humans, that animal maltreatment will become culturally unacceptable and real, lasting changes will be made." He goes on to say, "The abuse of animals is often the first step on the slippery slope of desensitization, the first step down that slope of a lack of empathy and violence. All too often," he says, I'm still quoting, "all too often animals are the first victims, and what should be seen as a red flag or warning marker is readily dismissed by parents and teachers as, oh well, boys will be boys, it's only a rabbit, what's the big deal?" Our humane education program has made lasting changes in the lives of many of the learners we've engaged with. Said Elton, aged 15, "For me, humane education is a great and joyful program. It's made me into a better person." Said Brendan, also aged 15, "Humane education gave me a new pair of eyes. Everything I look at now, I see differently." Encouragingly enough, more than a year after our humane education program in a school near Cape Town, serving learners from a disadvantaged community, the class teacher ran up to me when I was there and told me of a discussion she had overheard just the day before between 2 of the young boys who'd been part of our program. She reported this: that a dove was sunbathing in the playground, extending its wing to catch the rays of warmth. The boys saw this, and the one said to the other, "See, that's freedom from pain, injury, and disease." "No, it's not," retorted the other. "That's freedom to express normal behavior." They amicably argued the point. Our 5 Freedoms program had opened a new window of curiosity for them that would otherwise have remained closed. Had they not been exposed to our program, they probably would not have even noticed the bird, or they may well have aimed a few stones at it. I believe that by adopting UNCAP, the United Nations will set the standards expected of humane nations globally. By adopting UNCAP, the United Nations will be giving the world the greatest gift, a more humane society. As I thank you for the time you have given me, please have a look at our humane education lesson plans if you get a chance. And here is a 3-minute play about the 5 freedoms presented by the class of which the 9-year-olds were part. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise, for this great contribution. I really enjoyed watching the video. Louise is with us live, so if some of our experts or YouTube participants have some question for Louise, now is the time. Maybe I would have one for you, Louise. Do you think that we could actually build more peaceful societies by educating our children to kindness and compassion towards all others? And do you think it's feasible to implement such classes, such programs in all schools.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay. I think that we as a society don't know, that we have no idea that the way we are towards animals reflects the way we are towards everybody. And I just see the children derive so much benefit from feeling proud about themselves, and they do. And our curriculum is designed to include these things. And in our Caring Classrooms program, which is downloadable for free, 24 lesson plans, all curriculum aligned. I've always struggled with the animal cause. Nobody ever really wanted to hear, but the teachers want these lesson plans. And I think it shows that it's time, the world is right. They understand we need to change, and we do. And yes, I do think some of our lesson plans are about elders. Did somebody say that? Yeah, those, it's all included. You'll see it's not just dogs. Oh, that one was about dogs because those children know dogs, but it goes on to all types of animals.
Thank you so much, Louise. I now give the floor to Eva, who will introduce our last panelist for today.
Yes. We are extremely grateful to welcome as our last speaker, Paisu. She has been active in humane education and non-profit organizations for nearly 25 years. And she's the founder and chief executive of ACT Asia, an organization that initiates education programs aimed at children, consumers, and professionals for gradual and sustainable social change. Today, she will enlighten us on the regional relevance of the UNCAHP for the Asian context. Pei, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. Let me to share my screen first before I start. Can you all see the PowerPoint? Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for Global Animal Law, GAL Association and Global Research Network to invite me to be in this panel to discuss my experience in Asia. Particularly, I would like the focus today, I will talk about the importance of UN Convention on Animal Health and Protection under the ACT Asia context. I'm Pei, I'm the CEO and co-founder of the ACT Asia. And before we talk about what my main subjects, I would like to really bring you to see the population and the percentage of how it related to the world. ACT Asia has worked in Asia and focused extensively in China in 2006. So although today's presentation, I will mainly use China as an example, but I think the observation and recommendation are applicable to the Asia context. Sorry, I just need to make sure this goes. Yeah, next. And you can see from these slides, the 4.6 million is inhabited in Asia, and that made up for the 60% of the world population in just counting Asia on their own. And together, China and India together representing 36.17% of the world population, and they are a lot of people together within these two countries on their own. And so we can't not look at this perspective or into the context when we are talking about human animal health and when we talk about the global context as well. As you can see from the slides, the COVID-19 pandemic has made all of us, realize the seriousness of the zoonotic disease. And Asia is a hotspot for it. And most emergent zoonotic disease often originated from south and southeast of Asian subregions, such as SARS in China in 2002, and Nipah virus in Malaysia in 1999, and Bangladesh in 2001. And zoonotic diseases are a threat to human animal health worldwide, as the 2/3 of all emerging infection disease now of human are zoonotic, such as Ebola, SARS, avian influenza, swine flu, influenza H1N1. And from the graph here on the right, you can see from all these outer factors, from growth in population, increase the international travel, to the agricultural trade, even to here we from here we can see from weaker the health system, intensive farming system, and that is growing threat to climate change, and that causes the wildlife disease, and then to livestock disease. We're in this vicious circle that accelerates the zoonotic disease to just carry on, and we are not getting out of it. And we need to address these issues through the root cause. And I think what we are, in the slide I'm trying to show is many of the audience today and will agree with me about animal, and from healthy nature to the healthy humans to the healthy animal, and they're all pointed to the one welfare and one health. However, such a concept need to be integrated and implemented into the country's policies and their legislation, particularly in Asia as well. For example, in 2020, we all just been through, or have still been through, the pandemic, made the wildlife trade in China to be on the spotlight, and more, more attention, and asked to examine the wildlife protection and the animal protection issues within China. And especially its intensive farming and trading of the captive wildlife. Sadly, during this pandemic in last year, the 13 wildlife species are still classified and listed as it's become the national catalog for livestock. So the one hand, if we think we are looking at the health of humans and one welfare, one health, but on the whole, the healthy animals and healthy nature, this interconnectedness still hasn't been truly recognized and to be implemented. And I think this is the challenge we are continuing to face in today's world. And as I mentioned earlier, addressing the root cause is really important in order us to have, the healthy animals and to talk about the healthy people, and recognize the animal sentience and importance of animal welfare and protection is very, very important, because in this part of the world, they are still lack of effective legislation and still lack of the effective policy to protect animals. And animals today, they still been seen as animal productions and as a unit but not as a living being. And without these legislation, and also to understand and protect animals, and to have infrastructure to hold the offenders, their accountability, we will never get rid of the challenge we are facing. And in recent years, the related to zoonotic disease, also the very heavily, downplay as well. And I cannot, address enough is we need more, academics, or authorities, or officials, even media, to understand animal welfare is a science. They are just not only the sentimental feelings. I also want to highlight is, that through the pandemics, many people are talking about, how do we stop illegal trade and how do we, effective to prevent the trade to prevent the wildlife crime. However, to talk about illegal wildlife trade is not enough. The bigger problem we are facing in Asia, particularly, is the commercial trade in wild animals. So these are very extensive list of the captive wildlife they've been factory farmed in this captive environment for a commercial purpose. Without all these important issues to be addressed and within the local context and with the national government and into the global arena, we would never be able to implement it, the health, one welfare and one health concept. And I think that's where the UNCAHP is really important to really provide that platform. I want to also use the example of a family to highlight what we are talking about the UNCAHP context. So we all know the first COVID case transmitted from human to mink and mink to human on fur farm was in April 2020 in Netherlands. And since then, there are many European countries I've listed here, and plus United States and Canada, they have all joined to have found the case with workers and minks have tested positive for the COVID-19. The mutation of the COVID in Denmark has caused the massive count of 17 animals in Denmark. But if you see this in contrast, that today the fur trade and farming in China has not been stopped since the pandemic. And publicly, we haven't seen the report or any outbreak or cause of the disease in animals on fur farms in China. And it's, despite there's a new law in China about the biosecurity, however, the trade between the different provinces through the farm, they export the live animals to the market to be trade their pelts, the production to be traded on the market hasn't been stopped to date. And we haven't seen any news so far as well to see how whether the animals have been tested in this farm, despite the recent medical article from the Dr. Shizhen Li from the China Exports of virologist, and she pointed out minks could be the intermediate host of COVID. The case I'm trying to highlight here is, despite we want to have a human health, we think this is the challenge we are facing. But when we come to the animal health, this is disconnected. I want to talk about this. The latest development on the ground is before and after COVID, the China continued to be the biggest fur farming country and fur producer and consumers in the world. So life carry on, the trade carry on, the dialogue science still really important, despite we are facing such a challenge. And in last couple of weeks, the 3 cities in Hebei province, they've been sealed and 20 people been in the new lockdown in this new year. And over 20,000 residents in last week were relocated to the different places for central isolation due to the concerns of the environmental transmission. So basically saying the residents not safe to live in the environment in where they are, so they have to they have to be transferred to another place. And it's very interesting that Hebei is actually one of the major provinces for the trade and processing. Whether it's a direct link to the COVID or not, that is still, questionable. And it's important to really using this slide to explain why it's very important for Asia. This is a time we need to make more concern and united effort to all the shortcomings in the management and protection of human and animals, and not just in China, but throughout Asia. And I believe UNCAHP will provide the world an ideal opportunity to give in a vision to leaders of Asian countries and emphasize the interconnection, interrelationship between people and animals. And we need to really, if we want to get out of the future pandemic, we need, the convention like, the UNCAHP to enable the government to understand the importance, and they can, take this issue seriously and to integrate it to their own policies and the legislations. And finally, we cannot address, we need to have a long-term solution to addressing the root cause through education. When majority of the people still not see that animals are living beings, they are sentients. When their children will grow up without understand, we have a responsibility to treat animals with compassion and empathy and give them the 5 freedom with the the suitable, adequate protection. And the consumer need to understand when they are consuming endless wildlife or or other animal products, they have a responsibility. They need to understand there is a consequence, and the COVID has given us those consequences. However, how to make these is become the great reset, not just the painful experience, and continue this vicious circle is the challenge we are facing. And ActAsia continue to work on the ground endlessly, and we have our own education material, and we develop is, make the caring for life education to emphasize the human, animals, and nature interconnectedness and the importance of all healthy, living and healthy animals and nature and people together through our education material. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pei, for this inspiring presentation. Let me see if there are any questions in the chat. Does anyone have a question for Pei? Let me wait a minute for people to formulate. If not, I see there's coming here. Okay, it's more like a remark saying that we need to try to embrace the term human versus people when differentiating between humans and animals if we move forward toward non-human rights. Thank you for this comment. I totally agree.
What do I think that?
There's another question. What do you think would be transcendental to stop this fur farming while the uncap is concreted?
I think there's no quick fix with regards to the using the fur farming, and we could only remember and make sure the issue on the ground is addressed, and the global consumers has a responsibility as well. The most important thing I think is for the region's leaders and the authority to understand, that to get the human health is related to animal health and plant health, as well, nature health as well. This is somehow I think is still disconnected in the part of the world we live in. We need to make sure we continue to address that through legislation and through the policy, not just as propaganda or as a concept to say, okay, we agree, but when we implement it, that is disconnected.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the last question. Do you think there's a chance that some countries' decision makers could be convinced to reshape policy so as to include animals' interests in a similar way as seems to be happening with regard to climate?
Absolutely. I think this is really important. That's what the convention like this UNCAHP is why is has its very significant steps, because that will enable the leaders in Asia country particularly, they could using these to emphasize in its own policy, and then come up with the budget and legislation. So when you have a convention, the convention will need to be implemented or integrated to the change of legislation in the local context. However, without a convention, the overrides is up to each individual, it's disconnected and does not globally have a collective effort. And then I think that's why UNCAP is important.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for this answer. Marina, now give the floor to you to open the discussion.
Yeah, many thanks again to our brilliant panelists for sharing their knowledge and expertise with us. We will now move on to the experts' discussion, and to introduce it, I'll now give the floor to Sabine.
Yes, thank you very much, all panelists, for your very interesting and warm-hearted presentations. In our next discussion now, the idea would not be to debate really the form or the content of UNCAP draft, but rather to agree on some objectives in support of such a convention as UNCAP. Indeed, the first draft phase is now over, and some of you experts wanted to participate. So I really thank those of you who participated in the first draft. Of course, we will take into account new suggestions for a second phase of drafting it. But for now, it's indeed very important to agree on real key arguments in support of such UN Convention for Animals. And we would like to have a final strong statement to promote this idea to the UN. So I will now read the first objective we were thinking about. This is just first ideas. And of course, they need to be complemented and improved. UNCAP is essential to fill the gap of global animal protection, also to protect animal health, welfare, species, and interests globally, as we could see previously, to give all animals a voice at the UN, of course, to make animal health and protection a new common imperative for all nations, to strengthen the obligations of responsibility, care, and assistance towards animals, to apply the principles of non-cruelty and good treatment of animals in all countries, and to promote the research of alternatives to animal production and exploitation. Of course, we would like to add other objectives as developing alternatives to animal experimentation also, and the need to adopt, of course, the One Health, One Welfare approach in the UN policy making, because we saw it's so important now, and the missing protection of animals in the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which are at the core of the discussions at the UN. So to start this discussion part, the key question is, in your opinion, what would be the best arguments in support of UNCAP, whether listed or not? And we invite you to discuss the best arguments according to you and your expertise for a strong statement in favor of such a convention. I now give the word to Marine, who will explain you how to best participate in this discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick reminder that this discussion will last a maximum of 30 minutes. Please raise your virtual hand so that we can give you the floor, and let us all try to be as concise as possible to hear as many of you as possible. Please don't be shy and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
I see that Antoine has raised his hand. So Antoine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, all the organizers and the panelists. Thank you. I'm impressed about the support, and want to say that the UNCAP is kind of focusing all the animals' interests that were seen in the law the last about 30 years and uses terms that are acknowledged by the scientists and the lawmakers in several nations. So by that, if we can just have a common ground to say this would be the next step, now including animal health, now including One Health, that is much broader than just the more or less also sentimental issue of animal welfare and animal rights, then I think there is a chance to make things move exactly right now. I wonder how realistic that is, and this is why we need to get really large to focus on one or two goals, and I'm curious about the discussions in the next 12, 13 minutes. Thank you very much.
Kian, I see you wanted to react.
Yes, hi, my name is Ian Offer. I'm a global animal law academic from Scotland. So I'd like to suggest a potential objective and also hear more about the work towards the UNCAHP and how it will prioritize intersectional justice and decolonization, noting that this requires both engaging with marginalized communities and also incorporating knowledges of marginalized communities. I think for this initiative to be effective and also ethical, there should be reflexive communication about intersectionality from the very beginning. I think it should be potentially included as an objective and also incorporated into the work towards the UNCAHP. And I'd be really interested to hear everyone's thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. The next one is Jose, who put his hand on.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you to Sabine and Antoine and all the organizers of this very, very interesting panel, and to all of you. I just would like to stress the fact that probably the main argument in this very moment is the interdependence between human health, animal health, environment, issues which are very, very much in mind of everybody in this time. So maybe it would be possible to expand a little bit on this argument, on the objectives and goals we have listed until now. And of course, we have to take advantage of the momentum and to try to raise public awareness, also with policymakers on this issue. I think the UDAO project is very important in this very moment, but we have the advantage with CAP of the interest of the public opinion in this very moment on everything concerning our health. So how could we better present the idea of interdependence, not only between human health and animal health, but between everything in the nature? I don't have the answer, but I think we should hammer out this idea of interdependence. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for drawing our attention to this issue. Thank you very much. I think Katie Hessler is our next expert who has raised her hand. Katie.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to follow, thank everyone for the work they've been doing and for the panel and organizing this, and follow on also what Ian and Jose have said. I think it's a moment in time where we can, without further instrumentalizing humans or animals from a human-centric perspective, we can actually talk about leveling the field and talk about our interdependence, talk about our codependence, talk about sharing the planet explicitly, and sort of drive those conversations further than we have before, and not put it into a binary right? Where we're either focusing on human-centric strategies or we're centering animals. I think this is a time where we can try to do both, and that's not something we've been very successful at before, but I think the pandemic gives us an opportunity to say this is a perfect example of what we've been talking about and a perfect good example of how good stewardship of the planet helps all of us. And if we can reframe the conversation so it's not a binary us versus them of interests and priorities, that, and I recognize this is, an easy thing to say and hard to do, but I do think this is a really unique moment in time where people might be open to this conversation in ways they haven't been before. And we have so many people who can help inform the way that we frame this conversation.
Thank you, Katie. You're right. It's very inspiring. Would anyone want to develop on that? The idea that we shouldn't have to have a binary vision and that we could actually take this opportunity, as Katie really very well explained.
Absolutely. I think I want to follow these, your Cyan and Katie's point of view, particularly in Asia. The animal sentience or welfare protection are all such a low priority in most of the governments. And to use UNCAP or use a pandemic to address the concern and to direct really close link with the human and nature health is one of the, I think it's strategy we need to take or position we need to take. To emphasize animals on its own, it's very limited chance for us, especially now we have vaccines coming out. We are expecting all the vaccine to do all the heavy lifting, but how do we make sure we not, forget from this painful experience and really link these to integrate it to the legislation and the policies? The reality is harsh. We might think is broaden the spectrum, but I think from follower Jessica is, are we ready to take this experience to the bigger arena to really voice for our advantage? And I think this is what we need to be realistic, not being in our own circle to say, yes, animal protection is important, animal welfare important, yes, but we might still be the minority in even in Asia context.
Thank you, Pei, for this valuable analysis. Thank you. Do we have maybe one very last comment or thought on the arguments in support of the adoption of UNCAP?
I think Louisa was trying to raise a hand.
Hello. Yeah. I just think so much is dependent on political will, so much, because why I think UNCAP we must perhaps join hands with all our supporters and everything to get some petition going to the UN to say, if South Africa can ban the consumption of alcohol because of COVID, if it can ban smoking and the various things it's suddenly banned, and if we all wearing masks and everybody's obeying, within a matter of a few days this happened. It's simply political will. And I think that if there could be some directive to governments, you've got to join here, you've got to become part of this, perhaps coming from Gal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louise, and other panelists and experts for your contributions. I fully agree with you all. And I think the petition idea is indeed part of possible wider campaigning for UNCAP, and that we have to think about how to do it properly for having a real impact, and when in the time it will be the best timing, but indeed, as Jose said, it's now the right time to push such a convention and making it clear that the interlinkages between humans and animals cannot be ignored anymore. So yes, thank you for your proposal. It's already in our minds. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. I think we are then going to the end of this conclusion of this very interesting discussion. And I want to let you all know that we will also try to organize a follow-up discussion. So we will be in touch with everyone about that. And I invite you all to join the GRN and become an associate member of our think tank and keep updated in that regard. Okay, Sabine, do you want to say a couple of words to end today?
Yes, sure. Thank you so much, Eva. Yes, thank you very much for this interesting discussion. And fortunately, we have a lot of things to propose and that still have to be done to improve animal protection worldwide. So don't worry, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. There is still a long way to go for the UN to adopt such a convention framework as UNCAP. And we saw that now is the right time and that global protection for animals is needed, of course, at UN level. We are also aware that previous initiatives paved the way for the UNCAP, and we believe that the UDA adoption can be a springboard to a global framework convention. So it's really good news. Thank you, Dirk, for announcing its adoption at the end of the year.
Let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
It's not a done deal yet.
Yeah, okay, we will all be behind it. The need to adopt such a UN convention for the animals is also now supported by more than 170 organizations, as Jessica could tell us in the manifesto for the animals. And I want to thank her very much for the huge work she did to have such an awesome manifesto and to promote it now. As Louise mentioned, the UN Secretary General also has recently urged all the countries of the world to make peace with nature for present and future generations. And the last UN report on harmony with nature clearly states that animals are sentient beings and highlights legal initiatives aimed at improving their protection. So yes, animal protection is advancing globally, even if many of us feel that this progress is going too slowly. I think we can be confident that it's going the right way and that some big progress can be expected in the near future. One thing is sure, we can go faster together and bringing our ideas and energies, as we did today, to come up with a strong collective expert statement, petition, and everything we can to push such a global protection for the animals and also through UNCAP. To conclude, I want to warmly thank all the panelists for their presentations, the participants in these discussions, and all our followers, and of course, the GAL and GRN teams for making it happen. We really look forward to our further collaboration to make this global animal protection come true. And we really need it for our humanity in the best sense of the word and for a better future for all. Thank you very much.